everybody. So we've got some big news today. Our first buyouts of the 2021 offseason, and they are absolutely huge, as it's the Minnesota Wild buying out the final 4 years of Zach Parise's and Ryan Suter's contracts. They originally signed back in the summer of 2012, which were 13-year, $98 million deals. Now, with 4 years remaining on those contracts, Minnesota has had enough and bought both of them out, meaning that they will be free agents this offseason. And there's a lot to delve into here with this move. Before we begin, I just ask that you please subscribe and hit that thumbs up if you haven't. It helps the channel so much and is greatly appreciated. But let's get into it here. Zach Parise and Ryan Suter, these two guys were brought in 2012 to be the faces of the Minnesota Wild and try and carry that team to the promised land. They had some really good seasons during the Parise-Suter tenure. They made the playoffs most of the time. However, they were never able to really make a deep playoff run. And overall, it was rather disappointing, their lack of playoff success. And now both players at 36 years old are starting to decline. Parise, I think more so than Suter, but there's significant decline in both of them. And Minnesota has decided to go in a different direction. So let's take a look here. Zach Parise, left winger for the Wild, 36 years old now. Last season in Minnesota, he played 45 games. He had just 7 goals, 11 assists for 18 points, and was a +7. Parise has had a lot of injury issues over the past number of seasons. His point production over the past couple of years has significantly decreased, and he is certainly on a decline. Between the injuries and between his age, Parise never really lived up to what he was supposed to be with the Minnesota Wild. Again, both of these guys were making a little over $7.5 million per year. And I am not at all surprised that Minnesota bought out Zach Parise. This was a guy that they were trying to get rid of for the past couple of seasons. Couldn't really find the right deal out there. And had, just wasn't the player that they hoped he would be. Again, had a lot of injury issues, so availability was an issue, and his point production had certainly decreased. Again, I'm not at all surprised that Parise was bought out, and you kind of saw this coming between him and the Minnesota Wild. I am, however, a little bit surprised that they bought out Ryan Suter as well, because Ryan Suter is still a very solid D-man in the NHL and is a huge minutes eater that can play 25 plus minutes a night and is still at a very, very high level. He obviously also is 36 years old. He was making a little over $7.5 million per year. They had the exact same contracts. And last season, he played all 56 games for Minnesota. He scored 3 goals and 16 assists for 19 points and was a +9. Suter is still a very, very good two-way defenseman. The offense isn't quite where it was, say, 3 or 4 years ago. He's not going to put up a 50-point season anymore like he did, back in his prime. But he's still a very good defenseman that I think could be a very good number 2 or number 3 still in the NHL. That's why I'm a little bit surprised that Minnesota wanted to get rid of him as well. Parise, you saw it coming. He wasn't performing at a high enough level, certainly not up to his contract. And, Parise being bought out is not surprising. But to me, Suter was, because guy plays a ton of minutes. He's a great two-way defenseman. He plays shutdown defense in his own zone. And while the offense isn't what it used to be, he's still, he had 19 points last year. He still can give you something from the back end. And, he's still a good puck mover. And I just think Ryan Suter has a lot left to bring to the table. So, obviously he's going to sign somewhere in free agency this offseason. Somebody is going to get a very good defenseman added to their decor. Yes, he's older now, but if you get him on a 2-year deal, I think Ryan Suter can still be a very, very good number 2 or number 3 defenseman in the NHL, and he plays an absolute ton. And you know, he's there. He played every game this past season. I just think there's a lot left in the tank for him. So I was a little caught off guard that they bought out Suter, but Parise, I was not surprised at all. So what does this mean for the Minnesota Wild from a salary cap standpoint, from a contract standpoint? Let's take a look. The cap hits per player on their buyouts are as followed. Next season, $2.37 million. That is per player for each of them, not combined. So Parise will cost $2.37 million against the cap, and Suter will count $2.37 million against the cap. Following season, 2022-23, they will count as $6.37 million against the cap for each of them. And then for the next 2 years after that, they will count as $7.37 million against the cap for each of them. So that means Minnesota in those years will have over $14 million in cap space tied up by players who aren't even playing for the team in Zach Parise and Ryan Suter. And that is when their contracts normally would have ended, after the 2024-25 seasons. However, because it's a buyout, you double the length and 4 more years get added on, and they will each count as $833,000 against the cap for the following 4 seasons, which is added on because of the buyout from 2025 through 2029. And then after the 2028-29 season, they will officially be off of the books. So what does Minnesota gain from this? You know, why did Minnesota buy these guys out? What does it do for their cap situation that improves their cap situation? Well, if we look over here at cap saved, it basically gets them a whole lot of cap space for this offseason, but ends up being more of an issue down the line. The buying out of Suter and Parise has opened up $10.3 million in cap space for the coming season, 2021-22. For the following year, 2022-23, it will open up $2.3 million in cap space that they would not have had they kept Suter and Parise. Then it gets very minimal after that. For the 2 seasons that they count as, you know, over $14 million against the cap in 23-24 and 24-25, Minnesota only saves about $300,000 in cap space for those 2 seasons. And then from 2025 through 2029, the 4 years that they would not have counted against the cap if they weren't bought out because their contracts would have ended, they will actually count against the cap. Minnesota will lose $1.7 million in cap space for those 4 seasons because each player counts as $833,000 against the cap. Double that, it's about $1.7 million. All of these numbers are from Cap Friendly. If you're ever looking for salary cap related stuff, please go to www.capfriendly.com or check them out on Twitter, where they really do a great job of explaining everything. For anyone who enjoys hockey, and especially someone like me who does hockey content, Cap Friendly is an incredible website to know. So that's where all these numbers came from. So as you can see, Minnesota, basically what they get is, well, both these guys off of their team now, obviously, which for Suter I think is kind of a downgrade. For Parise might end up helping a little bit. But they open up a lot of cap space right now, and then end up costing them some cap space down the line. The other thing that they get, and this is important, is that both Parise and Suter had no movement clauses in their contracts, which means they would have had to be protected in the upcoming expansion draft, which is coming up on July 21st. Obviously now their contracts are gone, they're bought out, so that opens up 2 spots, 1 forward and 1 defenseman if they decide to do 7-3-1, or just 2 skater spots in general if they decide to do 8-1, that would have been occupied for protection. They now can protect other players that they may want to in the upcoming expansion draft. But overall, I think this was a very interesting move by Bill Guerin, the GM of the Minnesota Wild. I'm not sure, how much Minnesota really stands to gain from this other than the cap space right now. But if Minnesota was going for it right now, wouldn't you want Ryan Suter in your lineup? I mean, this is a guy who is still a very, very good top four defenseman and plays in big situations and it still has a lot to give. So overall, I think this is a very interesting move. Obviously, the contracts were huge when they were handed out. Minnesota very clearly, I think, over the last offseason and now this year is trying to go in a younger direction. They're trying to get more of their money focus on the younger players, guys upcoming, the Kevin Fialas, the Kaprizov, the Joel Eriksson X, who just signed a brand new deal, the Jordan Greenways, guys like that. But if you're trying to win now, if you're the Minnesota Wild, I think you're better with Ryan Suter. Parise, he could be gone and you could be fine. He hasn't given a whole lot over the past couple seasons. But Suter, if they were trying to win now, I would have thought that they would have wanted to keep. However, if they're trying to build for the future and not necessarily win now, that the cap-wise, it's more helping you now than it is down the line where it's actually going to hurt you cap-wise. So overall, it's an interesting move. Again, I think the expansion draft did play a big role in this happening. I really think they wanted those 2 extra spots to protect other players in the expansion draft and not have to protect Parise and Suter. So overall, big moves here for Bill Guerin and the Minnesota Wild. Their 2 biggest contracts, guys that they had locked into very long-term deals back in 2012. Guerin obviously wasn't the GM at that time, but that had been with Minnesota for a long, long time and was kind of supposed to be the faces of the franchise. That era has come to an end. The Zach Parise and Ryan Suter era has come to an end in Minnesota. They are going in a different direction, and it is going to be interesting to see what they do with that cap space that they have now acquired this offseason, and it's going to be interesting to see where Parise and Suter end up because they will now be unrestricted free agents on July 28th and will be able to sign with any team in the league that they so wish to. That pretty much does it. So like, comment, share, subscribe, follow on social media. All those links are down in the description. If you'd like to further support the channel, the links to our Patreon, merchandise store, donation links, and channel memberships are in the description as well. Keep spreading the word about this channel. Let's keep this thing growing. Thank you very much for watching. Hope you enjoyed the video, and I'll talk to you guys soon.